We are studying the biological basis of human behavior. So it is important to study the nervous system and endocrine system. Both these systems work together to influence many aspects of human behavior, including growth, reproduction, and metabolism. So, in this video, we will study the structure and functions of nervous system and endocrine system and their relationship with behavior and experience. The nervous system guides almost everything you do, think, say, or feel. It controls complicated processes like movement, thought, and memory. It also plays an essential role in the things your body does without thinking, such as breathing, blushing, and blinking. The endocrine system is a network of glands and organs that located throughout the body. It is similar to the nervous system in that it plays a vital role in controlling and regulating many of the body's functions. The nervous system uses nerve impulse and neurotransmitters for communication, while the endocrine system uses chemical messengers called hormones. So before going to the details, please remember to subscribe the channel. Thank you. First, we will see the nervous system. The nervous system has two major parts, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. Central nervous system known as CNS and the peripheral nervous system known as PNS. The central system is the primary command center for the body and is comprised of the brain and spinal cord. The peripheral nervous system, the periphery means what? The outside of something or the outer part. It consists of a network of nerves that connects rest of the body to the CNS. That is, all those nerves outside the brain and spinal cord is termed as peripheral nervous system. The two systems work together to collect information from inside the body and from the environment outside it. The system processes the collected information and then dispatch instructions to rest of the body, facilitating an appropriate response. So, these two systems, that central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system, it collect information within the body and outside the body, that is from the environment, and they process the information and then provide instruction to the body to provide appropriate response. The PNS can also be subdivided into smaller components, the somatic and the autonomic system. The somatic system involves parts of the body a person can command at will. The autonomic help run involuntary functions such as pumping blood. Then the somatic system consists of fibers within cranial and spinal nerves that enable to perform voluntary body movements. It contains sensory and motor neurons. For example, sensation from the skin, the muscles and joints, etc. So, this is the nervous system. It is divided into peripheral nervous system and central nervous system. This central nervous system includes brain and spinal cord. The peripheral nervous system, it is divided into the autonomic system and the somatic system. The autonomic system again contains sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. We will see all these in detail in the coming slides. The somatic nervous system, it includes the sensory and motor neurons. So this is about the nervous system. Two parts, central and peripheral. Then central contains brain and spinal cord. Peripheral is divided into autonomic and somatic. Autonomic further divided into sympathetic and parasympathetic. Central nervous system. The nervous system is divided into central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. Now we will look into the details of central nervous system. It includes the brain and spinal cord. The functions of the central nervous system includes take in the sensory information, process that information and send out motor signals. Then the neurons are of three types: sensory, motor and interneurons. Then spinal cord contains nerves known as cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral and coccygeal. With the help of diagram, we can see this in detail. So the central nervous system, it includes the brain and the spinal cord. It refers to as central because it combines information from the entire body and coordinate activity all across the body. The brain is the most complex organ in the body and it uses 20% of the total oxygen we breathe in. The three broad functions of the central nervous system are to take in the sensory information. It takes the sensory information, then it processes the information and then send out motor signals. The brain consists of estimated 100 billion neurons and each are connected to 1000 more neurons. The neurons or the nerves are differentiated according to the function. So as we see, the function of the central nervous system is taking in the sensory information. After processing, the motor signals are sent out. So those who take the information are known as sensory neurons. This red color one is the sensory neuron. It takes the information. Then it is processed and then the motor signals are sent out. So sensory information is taken, it is processed and then motor signals are sent out. So the sensory neuron carries the information and the motor neuron, it transmits the information to the muscles or the glands, and an interneuron is there. The red color one showed is the sensory neuron, the blue color one is the motor neuron, and in between this black color one, it is the interneuron. It is very common and it is found in the central nervous system and it is responsible for communicating among the neuron. It communicates between this sensory neuron and the motor neuron. The spinal cord, it is long, thin and tubular bundle of nerves and supporting cells that extend down from the brain. So the spinal cord, it extends down from the brain. The brain is protected by the skull. The spinal cord is encased by the vertebra that make up the spinal column. The brain and spinal cord are both covered with a protective triple layered membrane called the meninges. So this is the meninges and this brain and the spinal cord is protected with this triple layered meninges. The entire central nervous system is immersed in a substance known as cerebrospinal fluid. It forms a chemical environment and it allows the nerve fiber to transmit the information effectively as well as offering another layer of protection from potential damage. So the brain and the spinal cord is protected with a three-layered meninges and a cerebrospinal fluid. The spinal cord connects to the brain via the brainstem. This part is the brainstem. So the spinal cord is connected to the brain with the help of a brainstem. It is located inside the vertebrae or the bone of the spinal column. The spinal cord carries information from various parts of the body to and from the brain. So the spinal cord carries information towards the brain and from the brain towards another parts of the body. It consists of cervical nerves, thoracic nerves, lumbar nerves, sacral nerves and one coccygeal nerve. So 8 cervical nerves are there, 12 thoracic nerves, 5 lumbar nerves, and 5 sacral nerves. Within the spinal cord, the ascending tract of sensory neuron relay sensory information. So, the sensory neurons carries the information from the body part. So, an ascending tract of sensory neuron is there, and it carries the sensory information towards the brain. And the spinal cord have descending tract of motor neuron. It convey the motor command back to the body. So the spinal cord contains of the sensory neuron which carries the sensory information towards the brain, and it is in ascending form, and the descending neurons, that is from brain towards the spinal cord, and from spinal cord the motor information is sent to all parts of the body. Sometimes a quicker than usual response is required. In that case, the spinal cord can do its own processing. Usually, the spinal cord collects the information from the body part. It is then moved towards the brain. There it is processed, and the sensory information is processed, and then it is moved through the spinal cord as motor information towards the other parts of the body. Sometimes a quicker response is required. That time the spinal cord bypass the brain altogether, and an instant movement in response to the stimulus is created. That is known as reflex. The reflex is an involuntary and instantaneous movement in response to the stimulus. Here the spinal cord do its own processing, bypassing the brain. So this is all about the central nervous system. It has a brain, spinal cord, the ascending sensory neurons and the descending motor neurons. The information is processed in the brain. The brain is protected by the skull, and the spinal cord is protected by the vertebrae. Another protection layer for the brain and spinal cord includes the 3-layered meninges and a cerebrospinal fluid. Structure of brain. Brain consists of cerebrum, cerebellum, diencephalon, brainstem, limbic system, and reticular activating system. You will be able to understand it easily with the help of a diagram. So, the brain. The surface of the brain is known as the cerebral cortex. So, cerebral cortex is the surface of the brain. It appears bumpy due to the grooves and folds of the tissue. Each groove is known as the sulcus, and the bump is known as the gyrus. The largest part of the brain is the cerebrum. So this is the largest part of the brain. It is responsible for functions such as memory, speech, voluntary behaviors, and thought. The cerebrum is divided into 2 hemispheres, the left and the right hemisphere. The right hemisphere controls movements on the body's left side, and the left hemisphere controls the movement of the body's right side. Both sides of the brain work together to produce various functions. Each hemisphere of the brain is then divided into 4 interconnected lobes. They are frontal lobe. The frontal lobes are associated with higher cognition, voluntary movement, and language. The occipital lobes, they are associated with visual processing. So, the frontal lobe, it is associated with cognition, voluntary movement, and language. The next is occipital lobe. It is associated with visual process. Then parietal lobes. The parietal lobe It is associated with processing sensory information. And the fourth one is the temporal lobe. The temporal lobe are associated with hearing, interpreting sounds, as well as formation of memory. So, 4 lobes are there. The frontal lobe, the temporal lobe, the occipital lobe, and the parietal lobe. Then comes the cerebellum. Cerebellum is the little brain. It is the second largest region of the brain. It is located behind and below the cerebrum. So this is cerebrum and the cerebellum is located behind the cerebrum. The back of the brainstem and it is attached to the midbrain. The cerebellum is involved in the movement and coordination, walking, posture, reflexes, eye and head movement. The cerebellum manages all these things like the movement and coordination, walking, posture, reflex, eye and head movement. Then the diencephalon. It is located between the cerebrum and midbrain. It consists of thalamus and hypothalamus. So the thalamus and hypothalamus. It is the diencephalon. It lies deep in the cerebral hemisphere. The centers in the hypothalamus regulate our body temperature, blood sugar, hunger and hormones. So the diencephalon consists of hypothalamus and thalamus. The thalamus involved with sensory signal sent to the higher forebrain, in particular the cerebral cortex. Then comes the brain stem. The brainstem lies just below the cerebrum and in front of the cerebellum. It continues from the cerebrum above and connects to the spinal cord. The brainstem is made up of midbrain, pons and medulla oblongata. So, these three includes the brainstem. The midbrain, the pons and the medulla oblongata. The midbrain is the reflex center for cranial nerves and is involved in eye reflexes and movements. The pons help regulate breathing. The medulla oblongata, it influences the heart, breathing and circulation. It is the center for vomiting, coughing and hiccups. Then basal ganglia is there. It is in the forebrain and it consists of structures involved in motor processes. Then comes the limbic system. It is located deep in the temporal lobe. It includes several structures like the cingulate gyrus, mammillary body, olfactory tract, amygdala and hippocampus. So all these involves the limbic system. Its functions are fundamental: how we think, feel and respond to the world around us. Then comes the reticular activating system. It acts like the ignition system of the brain. It awakens an individual from sleep to a state of heightened awareness. For the sensory signals traveling towards and away from the cerebrum, this system acts as a gateway. So, the sensory signals, we know that it moves towards the cerebrum and from the cerebrum. So, it acts as a gateway. So, only selected sensory messages are passed to the cerebrum. So, this reticular activating system, it acts as a gateway for the signals traveling towards the cerebrum. Damage to this system can lead to a transition into coma because its position is in the back of the brain and the back of the brain is very vulnerable to damage during accidents. So this is about the structure of the brain. We have cerebrum, it have 4 lobes, then the cerebellum, This is the largest and this is the second largest. Then comes the stem, the brain stem, and it goes towards the spinal cord. Now, the peripheral nervous system. We learned the central nervous system, which include the brain and the spinal cord. Now, all those nerves or the nervous system that is outside the brain and spinal cord is known as the peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system include the peripheral nerves, neuromuscular junctions, cranial nerves, and spinal nerves. The major functions of the peripheral nervous system includes it controls the autonomic body functions, then it controls the motor movements, then digestion, and then it relays sensory information to the central nervous system. So these are the functions of the peripheral nervous system. For example, the processes controlled by the peripheral nervous system include dilating or constricting the pupils in response to the light, then stimulating the digestion, then activating sweat response, then controlling the blood flow and regulating the heart rate. The peripheral nervous system itself is divided into two parts, the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is responsible for regulating involuntary body functions like the blood flow, heartbeat, digestion, and breathing. The autonomic system is further divided into two branches, the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system, by regulating the flight or fight response, this system prepares the body to expend the energy to respond to the environment threat. So, if some threat comes, this system will get activated. When action is needed, the sympathetic system triggers a response by accelerating the heart rate, increasing the breathing rate, then boosting the blood flow to the muscles and activating sweat secretion and dilating the pupils. So the sympathetic nervous system, it is a part of the autonomic nervous system and it works based on the environmental threat or any response from the environment. So it triggers various response including the high heart rate, the breathing rate, then more blood flow towards the muscle, then sweating and the dilation of the pupils. Then comes the parasympathetic nervous system. It helps maintain the normal body function and it conserves the physical resource. So when the threat is detected, the sympathetic nervous system will work, and when the threat has passed, then this parasympathetic system will work. It allows the heart rate to become slow, then slow breathing, the reduced blood flow to the muscles, then constrict the pupils. This allows the body to return to the normal resting state. So when the threat is detected, the sympathetic nervous system get activated and certain changes will happen in our body like the improved blood flow, then increased breathing, heart rate, sweat secretion, etc. And when the threat is gone, the parasympathetic nervous system will work and it helps to slow down the heart rate, slow down the breathing, then it reduces the blood flow to the muscle, constrict the pupil, and the body will come back to the normal resting stage. Then the somatic system. It is responsible for transmitting sensory information as well as for controlling voluntary movement. This system consists of two major types of neuron, the motor neuron and the sensory neuron. The sensory neuron, it carry information from the nerves to the central nervous system. The sensory neuron allow to take sensory information and it's sent to the brain and spinal cord. So from the body parts, we have seen that earlier, from the body parts and from the environment, the information is taken and this is passed into the brain through the sensory neuron. So the senses are passed to the brain through the sensory neuron, and once it is processed, then the motor neuron, they carry information from the brain towards the muscle fibers throughout the body. The motor neuron allow us to take physical action in response to the stimuli of the environment. So some stimulus come, the sensory neuron, it passes that stimulus towards the brain, there it is processed, and then the information in the form of motor activity, it is passed through the motor neuron. This motor neuron carries that information and then it allows us to take physical action in response to the stimuli. So this is about the peripheral nervous system. Now let's have a quick recap on what we have learned. The nervous system. Nervous system is divided into central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system includes brain and spinal cord. We have learned the structure of the brain and the spinal cord. Then we have peripheral nervous system, that is what is outside the brain and spinal cord. It has the autonomic nervous system and the somatic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is further divided into parasympathetic and sympathetic systems, and the somatic system includes the sensory and motor neurons. So this is all about the nervous system, its structure and functions. Now in the upcoming video, we will see the endocrine system. So please remember to subscribe and share the channel. Thank you and keep smiling.